go down the direction that we're headed now, or we can choose a better place, a better area, a better direction for our party and for this country. With respect to the Republican Party, if you look at what's happening across the country and right here in Colorado, the signs are not good. We are on a downward slide in this country and in Colorado. Registration numbers are on the downward slide. The unaffiliated is creeping upwards, and the Democrats have spiked. In 2008, with the election of Barack Obama, they saw a tremendous spike in Democratic numbers. So much so that since 2004 to 2008, whereas we had about 170,000 person registration advantage on Democrats in the state of Colorado, today that number is down to 7,000. 7,000. What does that mean? What it means is that it's not enough to win. We can't just have Republicans to win anymore. It's not enough. In order to win the state of Colorado, we need the Republicans to turn out, but we need at least half the unaffiliated vote. That's the bottom line to win statewide. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we need to do as a party to start winning again? I'm sure there are many answers, and many of you probably have your own thoughts and ideas about that. I'll share just a few of mine. I think that we have to be the party that is about the business of offering up solutions that connect with people. That's the type of party that I believe can regain its footing and regain the confidence of the people, and at some point down the road, regain the majority in this state of Colorado and ultimately this country. Solutions to the things people care about, whether it's the economy, energy, education, government reform, defense. We have to offer up real ideas. It's not enough to say to the Democrats that their idea is bad. That's only part of the answer. The other side is, well, then what do you suggest? What is an alternative? When the Democrats offer up the idea of socialized medicine, universal systems, single-payer systems, we all know that those things don't work. You look at Canada and Great Britain. But we have to offer up ideas that says there's a better way, like small business health associations that allow small businesses to group together, pool their resources, spread risk, in order to provide quality, affordable health care to their employees. And these are the types of ideas when it comes to health care that we have to be about as a party. When it comes to the economy, we all know what's going on, the reality of today. Millions of jobs have been lost. Businesses are closing doors all around us. The unemployment lines grow longer by the day. So what's the answer to moving this economy forward? It certainly can't be the fiscal irresponsibility we're seeing right now, throwing trillions of dollars at a problem that cannot be fixed by throwing money at it, that can only truly be fixed by restoring the confidence of the people that there in fact will be a better economic future for this country. It's largely known and widely accepted that the Great Depression of 1929 was widely attributed to a sudden loss of confidence in our country's economic future. No amount of money thrown at it by our government is going to fix that. That said, what will? It's solutions like here in Colorado, the fact that we're an energy state, tremendous resources that we have available to take advantage of in oil and gas, potentially nuclear. Sure, some of the newer forms of energy, geothermal, biomass, those are options and things that we ought to look at and pursue. But throughout this country, what we do know is that by allowing additional oil and gas exploration in federally leased waters, as well as in areas in Anwar and other areas, and using technologies that are respectful of our environment, by allowing these things, we can create millions of jobs and generate billions of barrels of oil and gas that will lessen our dependence on foreign sources. You want to talk about putting people back to work? That's a suggestion that Republicans ought to be offering up that will get the job done. And when it comes to education, this is another area where we Republicans ought to excel. This should not be an area where the Democrats take the ball forward. Most recently in Washington, D.C., the Democrats rolled off a scholarship opportunity program. 1,700 kids in our nation's capital, the low-income, disadvantaged children, who were excelling in a program where their parents were afforded greater choice in their child's education. And the Democrats wrote that program off. Yet their rhetoric says they're all about helping low-income and disadvantaged people. Proof's in the pudding. We as Republicans ought to be saying, no, this isn't the type of initiative you do away with. This is the type of initiative that you expand. working in D.C. The data said these kids were excelling. Let's move it to Colorado. Let's move it to other parts of the country. These are the types of solutions that we have to be about as a Republican Party. We have to connect with people on the issues they care about. When it comes to defense, that's a natural issue for Republicans. Just because we have not been hit in recent years doesn't mean we won't be hit again. We cannot take our eyes off the ball. Terrorism is a very real threat. And for those who've had the opportunity to serve in the military or Department of Defense in some capacity, you know and understand the threat this country faces. It's very real. There are people who seek to do us harm. In a recent Wall Street Journal article that was released, I think it was a little over a month ago, they highlighted what's going on with certain people in the Somalian American community. These are isolated communities throughout the country where their young people are being targeted by radicals. Targeted, and they have a legal right to be here. They're sent abroad, trained in terrorist safe havens, and able to walk right back into the country. The point is this, not that any particular community is bad, but rather there are those who are trying to come up with creative ways in which to get at us. So we cannot let up our sight, if you will, and focus on preventing terrorism in our country. I don't want our children to have to worry about walking into a coffee shop and being blown out. Again, it's a very real possibility. So what do? What's the solution? Well, we can look at ways in which we can increase the ability for local law enforcement to work with our Joint Terrorism Task Force, that is the FBI and the federal agencies that are responsible for terrorism prevention. In the city of Aurora, for example, we have one officer. We have the third largest police department in the state. Colorado Springs has the second. We have the third largest in the state. We have one officer who has a security clearance that has the access to the information that the federal agencies have on domestic terrorism activities or related types of events. One. I imagine Colorado Springs maybe has two. Still, it's not enough. But offering up real solutions where we say we can expand the pool of law enforcement officers that have access to this sensitive information to ensure our communities are better protected, and that we have the people on the ground who are able to provide the feet on the street in order to go tackle the issues in our community as it relates to domestic terrorism and the threat of that, I think is a very real solution. That said, my point is this. Whatever the issue is, we have to offer up real solutions as a party. And we have to connect with people in a way in which they can relate to. One thing that Democrats have done a great job of doing is talking to people. We don't seem to do that well. And sure, you know, some people liken some of their successes to the government handouts that they tend to provide, but they're speaking to something that I think is core in most of us. And that is, most of us want to make a life for ourselves, and we're looking for ways to do that. And Republicans need to speak to that very same thing. I grew up in a working poor neighborhood. High crime, struggling schools. Perhaps some of you can relate. It was tough. My mother separated from my father when I was 7 years old. She worked 2 jobs to provide for 3 boys. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And she instilled in my brothers and I, a sense of faith in the Almighty, and to do what's right, to make a life for ourselves, give our best. And so it was when Kathy, my wife, and I started out in life, all we had to our name. She was pregnant with our first child. We had a Honda Civic, a 13-inch TV, a pillow, a blanket, and our clothes. That's it. But we also had a dream that somehow, some way, we would make a life for ourselves. And we as Republicans have to remember that that's what matters most, is people's ability to have the liberty to make a life for themselves. And our solutions ought to be based around that premise. Not that government is the solution, because in many cases it's not. But realistically, there are cases where government can help work with private sector to find the solution. And we ought to own up to that. That said, now's the time, I believe, if ever there was a time in our history for the Republican Party to step up to fulfill its role of being that party that stands up for liberty, that party that seeks to protect the rights of the individual, of fiscal responsibility, of keeping government to the lowest practical level, now's the time. But it's up to people like us to do our part. And I hope that each and every one of you are willing to do yours.